To say that TRiDENT were coming off of something of a high when they finished their last mini-album DX would be to put it rather lightly. I mean, this was a mini-album that included songs like Spoopy, which I think is still their most popular song, and opened them up to a whole new range of overseas audiences as well. It included songs like Cry Out, which was massively popular with their core fan base and really went down well in the Japanese Tokyo rock scene. They had songs like Signal that cemented their reputation for variation and doing songs of all different types. So, where do you go next when you're a band on the rise, you're big into doing mini albums, and therefore there is a need for quick turnover? Well, you release Dream Up, the new mini album that came out not so long ago, and well, it's time to dive in and give it a little bit of a deeper look. Hi there and welcome back to Japan, and before we get into this album, it's worth pointing out a little bit of history for the band. Now, if you didn't already know, I have been following these girls ever since they were in girls rock band Kakumae, the band that came before TRiDENT and in its breakup somewhat formed TRiDENT. And I have been really pipping them as the band to watch for quite a few years now. And one of the main reasons being is that they're a three-piece where every single member carries their weight, and more so, they sound more full than most five-piece bands. On top of that as well is the fact that they have a core attention to detail in songwriting. And this is something that's often overlooked. The musicianship, as great as it is not the key to TRiDENT's success. It's really about their ability to write a variation of songs. Yes, they're mostly hard rock, but each song has a very different tempo, a very different feel, a very different style. Even the choruses are written in a very different way. They're one of those groups who the telltale sound is there in Asaka's voice and in the pure quality of musicianship, but there's no telltale sign in their writing which makes all the songs the same or too similar. So TRiDENT are a group who really have shown the ability to grow and do more things. So my faith in them has been very much rewarded, even if they have no idea who I am. I have still been feeling so happy every time a new release has come out and made me think, yes, they're still on track. But as mentioned, when we came out of DX, we were coming out of an album that hit so hard, both commercially having more success than I think anyone expected, but also really cementing their ability to release singles that all worked in very different ways. I was intrigued going into this new mini album what we were going to get. Now, it is fair to say that of the songs on this mini album, 3 of them had already come out. It's a 5-track album, but 3 of them had already come out in advance. So we're going to be talking about them as well as the 2 new songs that have been released as part of this mini album and talking about how the whole thing fits together. Now, first song out the gate is Kickass, and this was a track that when I reviewed it before, I pointed out just is very good at grabbing your attention. It seems to really know what the fans want and goes for those things. It's got a catchy chorus, not like sort of #1 hit single catchy, but catchy enough that if you play it in a rock venue, everyone can sing along to it. It's got a really good sense of pace, attention to detail, but also it has that wonderful little bridge where it breaks down. It goes into a guitar lick, but it's a guitar lick which is beautifully used. It's very frenetic, very sort of keeps the pace up, and then they drop out a beat. Nagisa wonderfully changes the beat underneath everything, and it just makes this wonderful swirl of energy that launches you into a final chorus that, again, continues to kick ass. It's a fantastic opening song. On its own, would I say this is like the greatest single ever from TRiDENT? Not necessarily, but what it is it's a really good crowd rouser. It's one that gets the crowd on your side. It's one that, as I mentioned, you'd be really wise to play in a club, and therefore it's a really good way to open up an album. Next song up is Repaint, and this was the first single to actually come out from Dream Up. And when it came out at the time, I remember saying that this definitely feels like a song that's playing to the core fan base, going back more towards the early years of TRiDENT. I know they haven't been around that long, but it feels so long because of all the progress. It's very much got that slightly overcomplicated, slightly busy feel to it that works when TRiDENT do it because they're a 3-piece and they know how to sort of mix everything together. But at the same time, I wouldn't imagine this being the sort of song that I would normally put forward as a single. I thought it was an interesting choice as a single. I don't really think it's the one that would win over a huge number of new fans. However, in this setting on the album, I think it really works because of the fact that it maintains that energy that Kickass left behind, adds a little bit more layering to it to sort of thicken it up and really, kind of continue that build-up of energy that, started at the beginning of the album. And also, it has grown on me over time, as I kind of felt it would. It's not one of those instant impact songs, again, why I perhaps don't see it so much as being a single. It's one of those songs where the more you listen to it, the more you just kind of enjoy the overall layering of sound that it has at its core, and the ability it has to maintain that energy that you get from the end of Kickass. Which brings us on to the next song, Twinkle. And to say that I think this is the secret that they had been holding back, yeah, I think this is definitely a song that I have to assume it's going to get a music video, because 3 of the 5 songs already have music videos, and this one definitely has single written all over it, as well as being a truly top quality song. In fact, the funny thing is, if you look on Spotify, the 3 songs that had music videos didn't actually officially get released as singles, whereas Twinkle has, apparently, according to Spotify, for what that's worth. And Twinkle, as I mentioned, has everything you want from a real banger of a single. It's extremely catchy, in fact, much catchier than I was expecting from a TRiDENT song. TRiDENT are a band who can do good choruses, but like contemporaries like Bandmate, it's not necessarily their number one strong point. I mean, you want them to put a good chorus on certain songs, but you don't expect super catchy from them. This song comes out the gate pretty catchy. It also has some, shall we say, quite experimental digital bits of production in there, which remind us of Spoopy. And this is the interesting thing. There are echoes of Spoopy in this song. I get the feeling that, knowing that Spoopy was such a big single on the last mini album, they wanted to capitalize on a little bit of that. But the benefit is that this is not a rinse and repeat. Yes, if you are familiar with Spoopy, you might recognize a little bit of that sort of glitched out production that's appearing here, but as a song, it is totally different. I would say this is kind of like the joyous, happy to be alive version of Spoopy. It has the same amount of energy, has the same amount of force, it has the same sort of engaging style of production, but it's that little bit more catchy. It's got a few more major chords. It has a chorus that resolves beautifully at the end and sort of just plays you out on this wonderful, as I often say, when you get the last chorus and it's going well and you just milk it, just keep it going on for a few more times around. It's like that. I just think this is a wonderful and very rare example of saying, well, look, we did something before that worked. Let's try to do something similar, but it doesn't feel like it was written just for the sake of being a repeat. If anything, there's a good possibility that this was written with no thought towards Spoopy at all, and then maybe just the producer listened to it and thought, I could do something a bit spoopy with that. Whatever it is, we've ended up with a song that manages to capitalize on all the things that made Spoopy such a big song for them, but has a totally different feel to it, is more catchy in its chorus, in my opinion, and I love it. I mean, the fact that those glitchy effects are nicely put together with a little bit of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, a little bit of glockenspiel in there as well. This is an absolute banger of a single. Yes, I know that it might not work in the same way that Spoopy did, because Spoopy, I mean, the reason why that really blew up online is because it appealed to it was arguably probably their heaviest song. It came across very heavy, and it appealed to an audience overseas who are very receptive to Japanese music, but tend to be slightly more hard-edged, tend to be more into like metal music as a general. I don't think Twinkle's going to have quite the same appeal, because of the fact that, as aggressive as it is in its production, it doesn't quite have the same metal edge. But in my opinion, I do think, from what I've heard of it so far, listening to it a few times over, maybe I need more time to digest it, I think it's at least as good as Spoopy as a single. Might not and never quite have the same legs, but I think it is a brilliant song. My hidden highlight of this album, and if this does not get a music video, what are you doing? But next up is Endroll. And this song caught my attention for being, if you like, the point when the album finally takes that turn away from constantly hyping you up more and more and more, and switches to a little bit more of a relaxed feel. I mean, let's face it, every album needs variation, even a mini album, but hey, this is TRiDENT. There's always going to be some variation in there. That's one of the reasons I love them. And I would say Endroll definitely is much more of a smoother, slightly more mid-tempo song, content to just sort of play you with these big melodies and has a bit of feeling, a bit of emotion, a bit of passion. I mean, Asaka's voice is always really good at translating that, but this is definitely the song where it's more just about the melody. I would therefore say that it felt kind of like the most unremarkable song on the album, but this is kind of the word I choose because of the fact that most of the rest of the album is so remarkably good. I mean, every song has its own standout qualities, and Endroll's biggest real issue is just the fact that it sounds just like a good rock song. It's just the fact that it doesn't quite stand out as much as the rest of an album that really stands out. However, it is still a great listen with a great melody and with a good amount of feeling, and the fact that it sits as a variation to everything else around it is a very strong quality. It means that it works as an album track. Yes, if I was to pick a weakest song on the album, I would probably go for this, but that would still make it the strongest song on a lot of other bands' albums. So, Endroll for me, there's not a huge amount to really say about this, except for the fact that it's just a good, passionate sounding melody. But definitely as an album track, I'm glad it's there. I'm glad it gives a little bit more body, a little bit more length, and a little bit more variation to this mini album. It turns it from just like a extended single and just enough tracks to make it a mini album. I sound like I'm really slagging it off. I'm not. It's a good song. And finally comes Now Future, which adds an interesting finale because, again, this is a mid-tempo, very passionate sounding song. The truth is it does a lot of what Endroll did just before, but frankly it kind of does it all a bit better. It's that little bit catchier. It's that little bit more rousingly passionate. It's got that little bit more production to give it a little bit more sonic identity. It is just kind of an advancement of a lot of what Endroll is doing. However, when it came out, I remember remarking that it was a fantastic single. I enjoyed it at the time. It was different. Again, plays with a different part of TRiDENT's sound and does it so well. Sounds very complete on its own. And I must also say that coming directly after Endroll in an album context kind of works, because in the same way that Kickass gives its energy to Repaint, and then Repaint is a nice ramp into Twinkle, I feel like Endroll, it's a good, like I say, it's a very good song in its own, but leading into Now Future, it gives Now Future a little bit more to work with. It, carries some of its melodic and passionate energy, throws you into Now Future, and then Now Future just takes it and elevates it to the next level. So again, this is an area where the structure of the album helps a lot. I mean, if these two songs were too separate on the mini album, you'd listen to one and just think, oh, it's just like, oh, are you just repeating it? Is it just, oh, we've gone back to doing that again, but better? But line astern, Now Future gives Endroll a little bit more purpose because one feels like it leads to the other. So yeah, I think the Now Future, I've already, as I said a lot of things. I love its kind of slightly, it's got like a weird bit of cyberpunk style production going on there with like the slightly choppy synths in the background, a little bit Blade Runner-y. But that's just sort of the underpinning flavour that goes underneath the song that is basically another big, passionate, melodic, mid-tempo song. And a great way to end the album. I mean, you can end albums a couple of ways, but I think we all know and like that old trope of ending an album with a big, passionate, sing-along song, which is what TRiDENT have done here. So, in conclusion, what does this already mean for the quality of Dream Up as a mini album? Now, it's always hard to judge mini albums anyway, because the thing is that you wonder to what standard should you hold them? Should you expect as much variation as you expect on a full-length album? Should you just want them to all be of one particular type and just, really be a blast of 5 songs that fit a certain energy? Well, in my opinion, I consider them as what they claim to be, mini albums. In a way, because it's a mini album, you basically expect an album with no filler. It should just be the variation. I mean, you want to do 5 songs, they should be varied. You don't want to do a full-length album, good, there should be no filler. In that sense, TRiDENT have always been very strong. And this is another album like that. As mentioned, the song that I probably found the weakest is still a song that would be extremely strong if heard in its own right. So, quality-wise, this is amazing. Is it better than DX? That's a hard one, but I would personally say that I felt that this had more... I felt this had more variation. I don't know if that's just because it's newer. There might be a bit of recency bias. At least it's as good as DX. I just realised I've got DX behind me. It's at least as good as DX, but I think there's no issue of quality declining here. If anything, I think we should just be impressed that they've managed to achieve anything as good as DX a second time round. But I would say possibly even a little bit stronger. So, this really moves on to the next part. Does it flow as an album? Yes. Very well, in fact. I think structurally this is really well done for a 5-track mini album. Again, the way that Kickass kicks things off is brilliant. I mean, it's such a great opening song. Going into Repaint, again, it's quintessential old school TRiDENT. It's not going to win over any new fans, I don't think. But hey, if you like TRiDENT, you're here for a reason. It really does cement a little bit of their identity, some of the quirks of their more frantic style of writing. Then after that, you have Twinkle, which beautifully plays the spoopy style production again, but does it in a totally different way. And for me, feels like a song that allows you to reminisce on their most popular single yet, and yet at the same time, in no way feels like a rehash. It feels like it's bringing something totally new to that formula. And then everything switches gear. You get Endroll, which takes you into a totally different direction and works nicely as a stopgap between itself and the final big singing out of Now or Future. So yeah, this is an album that is just really entertaining, flows really well. From a production and mixing standpoint as well, I must say that again, I felt this was really good. The production was very creative. That's one thing I liked. There was a good use of effects, but none of it really stepped on the toes of the band. You could still hear the brilliant playing coming from all three members. Serena's bass was nice and clear throughout, even when there was quite a lot of production going on. I felt it was clear. The drum work as well. Nagisa's a fantastic drummer, and it's really great to hear that there was a good amount of bite in there. I know that sometimes they go for slightly high EQ on the kick drum, which not everyone's a fan of. Kind of get that. But still, the drums sounded good and clear here, and they added a real definite punch. And of course, you know, the fantastic work you hear from Asaka's voice, beautiful and clear. So it was very clear to hear, but with some nice creative choices in there. Yes, I can accept maybe there are points where it feels a little bit overly compressed, but that's an argument that we can have about any album till the end of time. Everyone has a very different level on that. I don't think it was compressed to the point that it spoiled any of the songs. I think it was just kind of compressed to the level that you would expect in 2024. So yeah, clarity-wise, clear enough to listen to, no problems technically. And production-wise, I think the production for me was really enjoyable because it was that sort of production that adds a little bit of creative flair, that adds a little bit more to the interpretation of what's going on in the core three-member band sound. But, you know, it just worked. You know, it just worked without getting in the way of the music. So now for an actual genuine conclusion, I'm really going to give my final thoughts now. Wrap this one up. Basically, yeah, I think this is an example of TRiDENT doing something that is surprisingly rare. And we should acknowledge that. A lot of bands have a breakout moment. And whereas TRiDENT have been increasing in quality, success, and popularity over the years pretty smoothly, it is fair to say that DX did get them quite a big step up in their notoriety online with fans overseas. You know, they really started to become a band who was noticed by more people. And that's usually the point where bands really struggle to replicate that. And I'm just very, very, very impressed by the fact that Dream Up appears to have replicated what DX did, in several ways has improved upon it. It's shown the same love for variation. They haven't panicked and decided to just sort of rinse and repeat. There is a real feeling that they've got some new creative ideas they wanted to bring us on this album. It wasn't just released for the sake of releasing a new album. It genuinely feels like they had more they wanted to do, and they brought it to us. So I can't help but feel this is a demonstration that, again, all my faith that they are the future, definitely one of the big bands of the future, I feel it's very much repaid. And I feel that they are a band I would still want to keep my eye on. I still think that they are going bigger and better things. When we first heard about them, they were this new upcoming group, and the whole girls rock band Kakume thing. I would say at the moment, there are very few, probably no other bands who, when they say we've got a new song coming out, I'm more excited. I mean, as you guys know, I'm a Bandmate fan, and Bandmate have a lot of things in their side, you know, the 5-piece group with a huge body of material, massive variation, all those things. But I would say if right now TRiDENT and Bandmate had a new song coming out at the same time, I would be equally excited. TRiDENT, you know, they're a group who've been on their way up, their way up, their way up. They have arrived. I think we're just waiting for more people to notice. Maybe it'll take a full-length album to do that, another full-length album. But at the moment, I definitely think that TRiDENT are one of those groups who, if you're already listening, I think you're going to get a lot more exciting stuff coming up. And if you're not already listening to them, get on the bandwagon now, because this is the way to be going. Anyway, there you go. Those are my thoughts. I'm really so much enjoying TRiDENT. Can't wait to see what they do next. Genuinely excited. This is a fantastic mini album. I've been listening to it over and over, and I wholeheartedly recommend you too. But until I hopefully see you in Japan for the next one of these videos, for now, ciao ciao.